Okay, good evening, everybody. My name's Frank Del Fiugo. I'm from the United States, California, Bay Area, San Francisco area. Some of you have heard it, known it as Silicon Valley. I was born and raised here. I moved in. My background is in psychology and clinical psychology. I have an organization that is a staffing company, and we also do organizational development uh, for uh, for companies who want to work on things like communication skills with each other, team building exercises, team building training. One of the trainings and assessment tools we use are a psychological safety assessment to build better teams. So I have a wide range of experience in clinical private practice and organizational development. So today's topic is from stress to self-care and applying principles of resilience and flow to thrive. The reason I am saying applying principles of resilience and flow to thrive is I believe most of us understand what stress is, and most of us experience stress. Most of us understand the definition of stress, and we can Google it, and we can find anything we want on stress management, taking care of ourselves, wellness, all sorts of topics on stress management. Uh, the issue that the part of my work has been, okay, so we know, most of us know what stress is, most of us experience it, and what can we do about it different, that's different from what we read, with the basic things that we find online all the time. So meaning that, if it says self-care, take time off from work, do a breathing exercise, make sure you take your holidays or vacations, those kinds of things we're pretty clear about and understand that we need to do that. My work and my goal is to look at, okay, what can we do to build our strength up so that we can manage stress, and think of managing stress more heroically, like being able to do our work with extra energy and have more, a greater ability to bounce back from difficult times. And that's where I put to applying principles of resilience and flow in, so that we can get even better than we're doing now, rather than look at just basic stress management tools. So I'm going to go through slides, some of them on this PowerPoint, some of them I'm going to skip and go through quickly, because one, for time constraints, two is Joseph is going to get the PDF of the PowerPoint. And if you want to take a deeper look or a deeper dive into some of the questions and work through it, this can also be a template to do some of that after this presentation. So, so click forward here. So let's get started. If you have questions, you'll have my email address, and you'll be able to ask any questions you need for follow-ups or feedbacks, but I'll go right through it. We have about 40 minutes, 32 minutes. So here we go. This is just really thinking about what's your story around stress management. I put up this picture. I took it myself hiking. I took it in Kilimanjaro in Africa in the around 2010, and the reason I put it there is because I was sick, and I had altitude sickness when I was hiking up there, and I was nauseous. I leaned on a rock, and I saw the sun coming up above the clouds. So that being said, it was a really difficult time to get those last 1,000 feet or so. And one of the things I realized is that's most important for me in managing stress and being resilient and bouncing back is the idea that we are all more capable of doing more than we think we can. And that's something to remember when we're trying to work we're working with teams. We have deadlines on projects. We're in school. We have testing. We have to go through trying to graduate and looking for work, and all these things are going on. And often we get overwhelmed and tired. But to keep in mind that if we're doing it the right way at the right time, using the right tools and strategies, we can always do more than we think we can. So this is going to be for you to look at after this meeting, but really think of a time you overcame a hardship, what strengths helped you get through it, and then name a time. The second bullet point would name a time you were in flow, or what we call the zone. What did that feel like? And the flow states are widely researched concept. There's a psychologist named Csikszentmihalyi who did research on flow states in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I would highly recommend, if you want to learn more about flow, a book by an author named Stephen Kotler, and it's called The Rise of Superman, is what he talks about. He talks about flow states and achieving more than we think we can. So this is something you can do also. Before we get into managing stress and flow, let's look at burnout. People say, I'm tired, I burned out. Some people take it to the extreme level and get so burnt out that they quit their jobs, they have a breakdown, they look for another work, they take time off, they have relationship issues. But what exactly do we mean by when we're burned out or overwhelmed? And I understand this is an international training, so some of the words that I use based on where I'm from may not fit, but again, the characteristics will fit. So burnout is a cumulative, so usually it happens over a long period of time. It's a predictable process that we can only take so much, and then we break down if we're not strong, if we're not ready for it. We start to feel dissatisfaction in work. People can see it on us that we're tired, we're not performing well. Burnout is related to work environmental conditions. If you're in school, it can be related to the intensity and function of being in school, being in university. It can lead to health problems, any kind of stress-related issues. Looking at weight gain, weight loss, getting sick, beating up our immune systems. We do feel under pressure all the time. As we get more and more burned out, we lack motivation and energy to fix it. Where there's really no evidence that triggers are calling motivations, that it's not one event that, not motivation, burnout. It's not one event that causes burnout. It's a cumulative buildup over time. So it's more chronic stressors or stress that's happening, and I'm not addressing it correctly. And over time, I become burned out. So what are some of the remedies to burnout? How can I make it better? We need to find ways to recharge by relaxation and to utilize counterbalance measures. And what I mean by that is we have to do things that utilize the same amount of energy that the burnout is to counterbalance the burnout. A lot of people will say rest and relaxation. That's one tool. There are many other things we can do to be more active to keep a higher energy level. So some of the antidotes to burnout are the first thing is basic human survival. Really looking at our diet, our exercise, our sleep, and our ability to use breathing as a major tool to overcome stress. Old brain versus new brain practice. I'll get into that, but if you think of that, if we just break down our mind into two brains, we have a much older, stronger, primitive brain that's was built for survival, and we call it our reptilian brain or fight or flight brain. And that basically was when we were more tribal, that we were always in danger and we were always on the lookout for danger. And that saves us from some danger sometimes in the modern world, but not all the time. But what happens is our old brain is so much stronger than our new brain. Our newer brains, our prefrontal cortex. It's what all of us use to work, problem solve, create, have relationships. That's our newer prefrontal cortex, right in the front here. Our older brain's been around longer, though. It has more energy. It's stronger. So we don't need the survival mechanisms in our old brain that we used to, but our body interprets stress as a survival mechanism. So if you just think about it this way, our brain is saying, is telling us during high stressful events, like if I have chronic, a team that's really toxic or unhealthy, my brain's often telling me, you need to survive, you need to survive, you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die. So believe it or not, a reaction to stress is often from our older brain. We start to feel triggers in our body, our heart rate increases, our stress level increases, we're tired, we're angry, we're anxious. When those things start to happen, that's telling us something, and we need to move from our signaling from our older brain into our newer brain. We need to work really hard to get into problem solving mode. The best and quickest way to do that is making sure we're breathing and doing correct breathing techniques. That pulls from one part of our brain to our prefrontal cortex. So think of that as exercising and building the muscle in your newer brain to counterbalance your older brain. The older brain is good for some things. If we're in a life or death situation, it's really good, and it tells us something is dangerous. The problem is the old brain can't tell the difference between physical safety and psychological safety. Psychological safety isn't going to kill us. We just feel the same way as if we're physically in danger. By breathing and moving to our prefrontal cortex, we find that we understand that it's just a threat feeling, and we can overcome it by communication, taking time off, those kinds of things. So ways to do that: old brain versus new brain practice, breathing, social support, being around a lot of people who are healthy role models around self-care and stress management, daily protocols that goes into back up to food, exercise, sleep, and breathing. That if I can get those things and daily practices where I, for example, get up and spend 45 minutes in the morning where I'm doing some breathing exercises. I might go to a gym and exercise. If I can exercise outside, I'll exercise outside, or I'll do something in my home. But I have a daily practice that prepares me for a stressful day. So we call them protocols, practices, and do it as much as you can, or commit to doing it 4, 5, 6 days a week, to where it becomes a habit and that we don't even think about it. That is building our emotional and physical strength to overcome stress as it happens. One of the other tools is reframing or perspective taking. So basically, a good signal that we're moving into burnout is that we are in negative self-talk. So we have high levels of stress, and we start saying things to ourselves that are negative and hopeless, and we start feeling bitter and disappointed. And when we start that loop in our brain, it takes us further and further down to the burnout realm. So really paying attention to our self-talk, and then changing it back to positive. And that comes out of a theory of cognitive behavioral psychology, CBT, they call it. And the thing about cognitive behavioral is we know that if we change how we think, that will change how we feel and act. So really working on our thoughts to look for more hopefulness, can create new pathways in our brain to help us stay healthy and strong. The next one is self mastery, and think of self mastery as three types. That I have a structural would be having the protocols and processes that we talked about, and then reactive would be meaning what do I do in a situation that creates stress. So reactive would be how I communicate, that I remember to breathe, that I resolve conflicts quickly, and I have those tools that I am able to use when the unexpected happens to me. And then the third part of self mastery is expansive, that I gain more and more tools, and I come up with more creative ways over time to deal with stress and manage stress in a healthy way. The other one, and the last one, is what we call flip the switch. Again, if we get caught in the negative self-talk, the cascade of negative thinking, one of the things I can do is flip the switch. I can say, what was my best day this week? And then I might say, Tuesday was my best day. And I go, okay, I'm going to start acting as if today is my best day, like it was Tuesday. That little switch can help us move in a positive direction. It might sound harder easier than it is, but it is a way to do it. That I just make the choice to change my attitude, and that can work wonders. So I'll move on to the next one. Neuroscience of stress, two strategies right now. The amygdala is a part of our brain in the middle of our brain, and that's our fight or flight old brain that I talked about. One of the best things to do that is the breathing icon you see right there. That for the amygdala, when we're stressed, when we're angry, we can actually measure from functional MRIs attached to our brain that once we start breathing, that you can see the flow going into our prefrontal cortex, and you can see the fight or flight area relaxing. So breathing is something you can do before, during, and after any event that creates stress. It's also a good preventative way of dealing with stressful work, school, or stressful incidents. The next one is something maybe a lot of you have heard about or not, gratitude exercises. There's really evidence-based studies that if I do a gratitude journal, or I just think of write down 2 or 3 things that I feel grateful for, even once or twice a week, that can change our attitude, and that can change how we think and feel and act. So there's some really great research on feelings of gratitude. And then the second phase of that is putting people, communicating to others that what you appreciate about them or what you're grateful for about them can help our own minds create a much more alert and awake and feelings of chemical rushes that help us feel better and create less stress. So these are some counterbalances to feeling stressful. Prefrontal cortex, I put monkey mind. That's when we are thinking, overthinking things, and we might be losing sleep, or we might be not be able to focus at work because we're thinking about so many things. So breathing and gratitude helps us get out of that loop in our mind. Okay, so that's burnout and some burnout remedies. And then how do we make ourselves stronger? How do we build resilience? And resilience is that we bounce back quickly from adversity. So we all need, this is a quote from a military person here. We all need something to struggle against and to struggle for. The aim in life is not to avoid struggles, but to have the right ones, not to avoid worry, but to care about the right things, not to live without fear, but to confront worthy fears with force and passion. So really, resilience is about bouncing back, and it's about not avoiding, but diving into problems with an attitude of expecting that through our lives, we're going to have challenges, and that all of us as human beings have different levels of challenge, but there are some things that are always going to be the same. Like we're born, we get older, we have family members we lose, we get an injury, we go through tough relationship things that happen. That these are not things we can control, but we can expect them, and we can learn how to deal with them. And then going back to the beginning of the talk, if I'm working on my physical and emotional health consistently over time, I will bounce back quicker and have more clarity when I'm going through these difficult times. Resilience and stress. Stress comes manifest through a number of characteristics. So external physical stress. These are if we're chronically in, people who are in, get stress from heights, get stress from loud noises. People get stress from job losses, divorce, accidents. Internal thoughts cause us stress. If we worry, have negative thinking, even though no event has occurred, the worry is real, and that creates stress. So that kind of internal thought is often worry and anxiety about the future. Even though nothing's happened yet, it will create stress that we can work on not to have. Long-term stressors that cause a lot of chronic problems or terminal illness in a family member, dissatisfying job loss. Acute stress is a sudden stressor, a sudden shock, either somebody is assaulted or trauma. And then something from the past where people haven't grieved about the loss of a loved one, or it can be about the future, anticipating negative events, that anticipating something's going to happen when it hasn't happened yet. So those are things, how stress manifests, and we're going to talk about resilience and how that resilience can actually help us bounce back quicker. So what is resilience? It's the ability to bounce back from adversity or rise above a situation, the capacity to handle challenges, opportunities of work and life by doing things, which include recognizing stressful situations as to what they are, understanding what you need to do to take care of yourself, and thrive during the challenging times. So the third bullet point under that is really important, that even if we don't necessarily feel strong, acting in a resilient fashion helps us become more resilient. And I can expand on that later, but really, I see a lot of people in my office for coaching or seeking mental health services. And again, the people that are resilient are people who know they're feeling bad and know they're going through a lot, but they understand that to get back to where they want to be, they have to start acting like they're getting stronger. And it seems like, there's a couple different ways of doing that. One is talking about it and working through it. And at the same time, while I'm doing that, I can still work on what I'm saying to myself, like, things will be okay, I'll get through this, I've bounced back before. Having that type of talk helps us bounce back faster. So acting in a resilient fashion. There's some myths and facts about resilience. Often people think resilient people never show emotion. That's not true. Resilient people regulate their emotions. So think of the extremes, the ups and downs for resilience are like this. We get up and down, happy, sad, happy, sad. People who don't have that regulation go like this. And so it's more extreme and it's more energy draining. If I can regulate my emotions consistently, I can have more energy. A lot of people think resilience is about the individual. Resilience is about being an individual, but also having relationships and social relationships, close relationships, teams, coaches, friends to help us bounce back. If we're isolated, we won't be as resilient. A lot of people think they need to handle things on their own. Again, it's about being in relationships and being able to have a tribe around you that's going to help you bounce back. A lot of people think resilience is acting fast. Sometimes, again, with resilience, the stress management, we need to know when to slow down. And then a resilience myth is one of them. The final one is to accomplish superhuman feats. But really, the fact is we don't need to do that. We need to bounce back and show up consistently over time. And that creates a lot of energy and strength and increases our ability for lasting power over time. So then that in turn, if we do that consistently over a very long period of time, we often can accomplish things that seem like they're amazing or superhuman or extremely creative. So how do we build resilience? There's a couple of things to do. We need to look at our core values, what you stand for as an individual, meaning, having a purpose, persevering, like we were talking about before, keeping up the energy level, self-reliance, knowing that I'm able to do things, and that I trust myself that things will be okay. And then the word equanimity, meaning we need balance and harmony in our lives. So taking care of ourselves at the appropriate place, the appropriate time, and having a template or patterns or protocols that we do over long periods of time. So it's also, think in terms of tiny habits or micro adjustments, where a lot of us think that, for example, if I say I have to lose 20 pounds or 50 pounds, let's say, if I look at it like 50 pounds, it's overwhelming. But if I do micro improvements in my diet, exercise, sleep over a long period of time, I'll find myself in a really good position to be healthy. And not only that, I'll be in a really good position to be consistent over time and stay where I want to be at optimal health. And again, that will make me more resilient, and I'll be able to handle more that comes at me and also support others. Okay, so the external relational environmental strategies to build resilience, caring, supportive relationships, structure and guidance, and that's structure on my own, creating my own structure, like we talked about, protocols, but also having mentors, peers, friends, people, classes online, classes in person, things that we're doing on a pretty consistent basis over time. Something that's manageable, but again, we're creating habits of learning, habits of creating structure, and habits of interacting with people to get feedback, so that we can improve over time. One thing you'll notice that in all of this, we really need to seek out other human beings and other people who are like us and maybe a little bit different than us. If we tend to isolate, we lose the feedback loops that can tell us when we're doing good or when we need to improve. And a lot of people who isolate don't get the advantage of that feedback, and that can also lead to burnout, where we're not giving and receiving feedback and interacting with others. People have different levels of what their preference of interaction is. I'm sure all of you have heard introversion, extroversion. If not, I'll explain it later. But for the most part, having meaningful participation in groups or with another individual or a mentor or something like that does wonders for keeping us strong in a world that's really stressful. There's also physiological things we need to think about, and we talked about it right at the beginning, that we need to keep reserves to recover from stressors. So the question to ask, and maybe daily, is, am I taking care of myself through healthy sleep, food, exercise, and breathing? And am I doing this on a consistent basis? Because these basic human needs are going to are what's going to help us stay strong over the long haul. And if you think about it, if you think about it through an aging perspective, the things you do right now are like compound interest in saving money. In that, at what point in our lives do we start taking care of ourselves? At that age, from that point on, we can have compound effects in a positive direction. And it's just like saving money. And as you get older, our bodies aren't as strong and they don't respond the way we like them to. But if we're doing things at a younger age to get ready and build our reserves over time, we'll be able to do things well into old age for most of us that we wouldn't have been able to do. So, and then the language of resilience, like I said, what's going on in our mind. I like to say, pay attention to the voices in your head. Not that it's that anybody's having mental health issues, but we have self-talk in our brain, and to pay attention to what we say is important. So this is from a corporate psychologist. Develop an attitude of gratitude and give thanks for everything that happens to you, knowing that every step forward is a step toward achieving something bigger and better than your current situation. So really, again, we are going to have obstacles through our lives. How we label them is important. I really work on moving out of the word of obstacles or problems or issues to, daily challenges that I get better at each and every day, to really looking at what is our language and changing it to a more positive approach. So this is some questions you can ask for yourself if you want to analyze your resilience, have a conversation with somebody else. How do I build resilience in myself as a leader? How can we support each other in building our resilience? Which situations do you handle well? What do you need to handle more effectively? And how can we build resilience within our team? You can also ask these questions in personal relationships too. But this is something I've done in teams quite often. But again, you'll get this PowerPoint. A resilient group or organization embraces change, continuously learns and improves, realizes they learn from risk-taking and mistakes, and that's okay. Prioritizes engagement, really talking to one another and communicating, team building, that kind of thing. And a resilient team, organization, group, school, people is comprised of resilient people. So that said, those are just, if we just left it at that, those are ways of taking care of oneself. One of the things that I came up with in looking at flow states is, how do I add something on to the regular stress management that we can do? So flow states I'll define them in a second, but really what we're looking at is an immediate counterbalance to stressors going on. So if I'm having a stressful event at work, or I have a really difficult day at the office or at school or whatever, that I go home and the usual things might not work, where I just get back on the computer at home, watch TV, play games, whatever it is. How can I get out of the stress in an immediate way? And I'll talk about, and that's why I think flow and getting into flow states is really valuable. Now, if you're a gamer, you get into flow states gaming. There just needs to be a careful management of our time with that, where we want to do something quick that's effective, but we're not locked into it from, for 6 hours in the evening, that we're really doing it in a healthy way. So flow in life, from a quality of life perspective, psychologists have found that the people who have the most flow in their lives are the happiest people on earth. That's from Stephen Kotler, the book that I mentioned earlier, called The Rise of Superman. So here's from Dr. Csikszentmihalyi. There are moments that stand out from the chaos of the everyday as shining beacons. In many ways, one might say that the whole effort of humankind through millennia of history has been to capture these fleeting moments of fulfillment and make them a part of everyday existence. And that's what he has tried to explain over the past 30 or 40 or 50 years about flow. So what is flow? It's a psychological state where a person is fully immersed and focused on the activity or task. A feeling of intense focus on the present moment. Our mind, when we're in flow, our mind cannot wander because we have to focus on the task at hand, or in a physical exercise like skiing or something, we can get hurt if we're not completely focused. If we're dealing with people and we're not completely focused, we will wander. So it's an intense focus on the present moment, the merging of actions and awareness, a sense of control over the situation or action. And it is a transformation available to anyone, anywhere, anytime, provided that certain conditions are met. And here's those conditions. We can have psychological triggers. It's intensely focused attention, deep focus. We have environmental, which is something external. Might be looking at a beautiful mountain or a beautiful environmental area, or being in a beautiful environment that can trigger flow. Social triggers are parties, talking to people, potentially doing group exercises, being in a work team that is highly functioning can trigger flow. And there are creative flows like music, art, drawing, those kinds of things. So when we have these flow triggers, there's a couple of things: intensely focused attention, really deep focus. And it's not us trying to have a deep focus. We have to have that deep focus in order to get into flow. And it happens quite naturally, depending on how we set it up. But deep focus, we have clear goals. We know what and why we're doing something. When goals are clear, our mind doesn't wander. One of the things about flow is it gives us immediate feedback. While goals tell us what we're doing, immediate feedback tells us how we're doing it. So it tells us how to do it better. So if I'm snowboarding, for example, and I hit a bump, and then I respond to it correctly, and then I continue going down, I will be better and better and better as time goes on. But that extreme focus, without any ability to distract, puts me in a flow state. If I distract myself while I'm doing something like snowboarding, I can get injured and hurt, and I won't become very good. The other important thing in all these flow triggers are skills to challenge ratio, meaning challenge to skills ratio, meaning flow exists near a midline, that it's between boredom and anxiety. So if it's too easy, I won't be into flow state. If it's too difficult, I won't get into a flow state. So I have to find the perfect area where there's a little bit of fear starting to kick in, and it starts to spike, and then I take a risk to deal with that fear, and that will create a flow state. That can be in social situations where I go up and talk to somebody. I'll create a flow state. I can do it through artistic purposes, like I talked. Just keep doing something, and then something clicks. I'm in a flow state, or some active exercise. Okay, so just in terms of this, you can, when you're looking at this PowerPoint, you can ask yourself what flow triggers appeal to you, and then really think about a time you were in flow and describe it in detail. And then there's a couple of flow exercises that I usually would talk about, which I'll tell you right now. Just quickly, in a team building, for example, if I'm with a group of, let's say, a team of 8 people, and we're doing a training on communication and flow states and stress management, I would get them together and have the 10 people break off in groups of 2. So we'd have 5 people. And then I would tell them to say things like this to each other: what do you appreciate most? I would say something like, tell that person and tell the people in your group what you appreciate, the three things you appreciate most about them. So for example, if I do that right before lunch, after we've had a long PowerPoint like we're doing right now, if I've had five groups get together and say, well, three things I appreciate about you are you're really honest and clear. I appreciate that you're really smart and good at problem solving. And I appreciate you as a teammate because we have similar ideas. When you go from a PowerPoint to that exercise, and then you go take lunch, for example, the whole energy changes immediately like that. So that's what an example of kind of creating an immediate flow state. And that being said, the goal is that if you go all the way back to this beginning of this PowerPoint, if we can have a template or a toolbox of how to get into flow states or things that I can do that require a lot of focus to distract myself from the stress, that's going to have an immediate positive effect on my levels of stress. So if I can go do something that is challenging but not mind-numbing, not dangerous, but a little bit dangerous that I have to focus on, when I'm done with that task, I'm going to immediately feel have a lot of serotonin and other chemicals running through my brain that are going to at least temporarily deal with the stress that's been happening over time. So that's the reason for flow states. So this is what I was talking about. Optimal happiness and engagement is based on your capacity to understand and cope with the range of positive and negative emotions you experience. So, excuse me, we find flow when we find equal balance between our personal level of skill in completing our work and the challenge of work itself. So from a work perspective, if it's too easy, we'll be bored. We might get stressed because the voices in our head will say, this isn't challenging, this is boring. And once I go down that road, it's hard to recover. And if I'm in a more challenging situation that's not overwhelmingly challenging, that's the fine balance that I'm looking to achieve. So as we have a lot of stressors going on in our life, if I keep in mind that I need to keep this skill ratio assessment in place, where am I being challenged enough, and am I creating challenges for myself enough to help counterbalance and let go of some of the stress that's going on? These are good questions to ask ourselves. So here's a plan to think about after today is, what can I do to bring more resilience and flow into my life? What steps can I take for self-care to relax, re-energize, and revitalize myself? And one of the things, purposes of these talks is to really think about these things in a way we haven't thought about yet, because we're doing preventative work. And one of the positive pieces of information that come out of these is this, that if I recognize my stress earlier, if I can stage stress, maybe early, middle, late stage, if I start taking action in the early stages, I can stop stress from getting worse over time. And part of that is asking ourselves these questions. What steps can I take for self-care to relax, re-energize, and revitalize? And then 1 year from today, I've accomplished everything on my list to increase resilience and flow. How do I see myself, next year, next August? I have on this. So moving forward, I believe we're done right now. We're out of time, but really thinking what was an important insight for you, and maybe moving forward through that insight and taking action on it. And what I would encourage is, as quickly as you can after today, maybe writing down 2 or 3 notes on what your action steps are going to be based on what we talked about today. So yeah, that's it. And I really appreciate you guys having me. And I'd look forward to being back here again if you guys would like it.
Thanks, Frank. Really good presentation. We'll take questions from the audience now. Guys, if you have anything for Frank, let us know in the chat box. We'll give it a couple of seconds.
Sure.
What do you personally do, by the way, if you're in a stressful situation or you have a stressful phase, what are you actually doing, like in action or in practice?
Yeah, so I think for me, just what helps me is science-based research, because especially in a something like therapy, treatment, and mental health, there's a lot of evidence-based treatment styles, but there's also a lot of subjective ways of doing things that people suggest. But what I would say, one of the most profound pieces of research is the ability to watch what your brain does when you breathe. In that we can create the flow of blood or chemicals in our brain can really move. We can really move them around from a deep breathing perspective. There's more and more research on that. So I make sure, if before I go into any event, that I spend 1, 2, or 3 minutes breathing. I do it every morning. I do a 15-minute meditation. And again, there's so much out there with apps, YouTube. We can easily do that, and every day. And people often, that's the first thing to go when we feel stressed. We lose our protocols. So if I just give you kind of my basic, I get up in the morning, and I'm older than most. I'm in my 50s. What I do is get up, go. I do a 15-minute breathing exercise. I do reading with something to do in my field for 15 to 30 minutes, and then I do exercise. Then the next thing I do, one of the newer things that I do now is, what we call a sleep hygiene. That in order for me to manage my stress and sleep well, I do a digital sunset. I turn off everything at a certain time in the evening, and I don't look at it till the next day. And that's one of my tools that really helps me clear out from all the scrolling on the cell phone and the news and reading my work emails late at night. I cancel all of that. And at around 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, I don't look at my phone.
Mm-hmm. How do you get out of that thought process of, if you turn off your phone, or maybe I might receive an important email? Is it something you trained, or? Because for me personally, at least, it's like when I put my phone into flight mode, it feels like I might miss 10 emails here and there, which might be important. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so that's kind of the decision we have to make is who are these emails from, and are they important? And for me, I have, like, for example, my phone goes by my bed, my wife too. So what happens is, of course, if my mom's 82, my mother. So if she calls me, it's on, my phone's on favorites. She's one of my favorites, and if she calls, it'll go through my sleep mode on my phone. Other than that, I shut everything off, and I'll look at it right before 8 o'clock. And if it's something I need to take care of, I'll take care of it at that time, and then I'll shut it down till the next day. Now, realizing especially if you're an engineer and you're doing some work, and there's some deadline, or there's some product launch or something like that, or you have something you're working on the next day that needs to happen early in the morning, that may need to be a compromise. However, we need to look at slowly developing methods and protocols that are personal to us, that can help us release and turn off once in a while. Because turning off, getting a good night's sleep is like flushing your brain. it's like our brain recovers by thinking we're sleeping, and we need to think it's dark at night. We need to think it's day. It's time to go to sleep. Phones keep us awake. Ads keep us awake. They trick us into thinking it's daytime. So that would be one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question, I do some of my best work while being stressed rather than in a relaxed environment. Yeah. So here, this is important. That's a really important question, because think of two types of stress. So there's that fine line between super overwhelmed, where we're not going to be able to focus because we're in fight or flight. So what you're talking about, if I pronounce your name right, Murnal, that this is what we talk about around flow states, that you're right on the edge of stress and anxiety, but you're not taking it to the edge where something is completely impossible for you to do. But it's healthy to feel a healthy amount of stress. But when we get over that healthy amount, that's when we've gone too far. So I think what you're talking about is, they call it stress, distress, when we're really stressed, and kind of a word that made up word is eustress, EUSTRESS, and that is the healthy stress that we have and need to be productive. So you also said, can you give some pointers on how to find balance, as stress as being an ally and an enemy? Yeah, it would be how we think about stress and really knowing our limits, that how far, what is challenging versus what is debilitating. So again, when we're creating all the preventative measures of taking care of ourselves, that can guide how much stress we're able to take, and we can measure that. And I think one of the best ways of looking at overwhelm and stress is focus and ability to get things done. And if that's wavering, it's usually that I'm out of my league in something, or I'm fearful that I'm not good enough. But that's also saying that I may be completely overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, so I'm not able to focus specifically, really doing a deep focus on the things that I need to get done. So I hope that answers your question. If not, I'd be happy to respond more in chat.
Nice. What do you think about to-do lists? Is it more that you have maybe to-do lists for the next day, as I think you've previously mentioned before, or is it more that you have not to-do lists? Because with to-do lists, we tend to get very overwhelmed. How do you personally do that?
Yeah, so that again, that's up to each individual person, and rather than a to-do list, some of us work really good off of to-do lists. By the way, other people have the never-ending to-do list, so we all have to figure out what works best for us. Part of it is prioritizing the most important things at the top of the list, and really getting that done one at a time. So most people use the term multitask, and most people say they're either good or not so good at multitasking. But the one thing we need to understand is our brain cannot multitask. People are better at skipping from one thing to another and turning the first thing off and starting the second thing, then turning that off and going back to the first thing, which might make them look like they're multitasking, but our brains can really do one thing at a time. So yeah. I would say that our brains do one thing at a time and do it well. We call that deep work, focusing on one thing. So for me, for example, if I can do a deep hour of work in the morning, then I can turn off my phone for 1 hour. I get more done. So really do one thing at a time. And then the other point is, from a really good research perspective, if we're going to get better at lists, getting things done, focusing, we have to look at it in a micro progress sort of way. That if I look at things and I see them as too big, like lists are too big, I'll feel overwhelmed by looking at the list, and I might get paralyzed and not be able to do it. But if I look at one thing and do 2% of that piece of that bullet point on the list, and then I do 2% later, and then by the end of the hour I've completed 80% of that, and I look at it, then I'm going to have a better chance of accomplishing that. And then to keep this in mind too, there's one factor that we need to be more successful at getting things done, and that is when we get it done, we need to give ourselves immediate feedback, positive feedback, and encouragement. So think of ourselves as our own coach. And if I finish at one task that I do something like this: oh, good job. Or I say, I might physically do it, but I at least in my mind or out loud tell myself, you got this done, good job, you finished this, let's move on to the next one. Encouragement reinforces the behavior, which reinforces us doing the same thing over and over again.